Good afternoon and welcome fellow councillors, officers and members of the public to South Kesteven Planning Committee on Thursday the 26th of August 2021. Before we start the meeting, I would like to hold a minute's silence for the late Councillor Mike Exton, who is a member of this committee. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome fellow councillors, officers and members of the public to South Kesteven Planning Committee on Thursday the 26th of August. Apologies for the delay. We have a couple of technical errors at the minute. Thank you. Lovely. Thank you. Right. We have with us today in the council chambers Alan Robinson, our Deputy Chief Executive, Principal Planning Officers Chris Bown and Phil Jordan, Senior Planning Officer Ellie Seiler, Democratic Services, we have Alice Atkins taking the minutes and help with from Sarah and Amy, and Legal Advisor is Martha Rees. Please note that I'm not aware of any fire practice drill, so if the fire alarm sounds, please vacate the building by the fire exits and meet out at the front. Public speakers, please be aware you have 3 minutes to speak. You will be told when you have 30 seconds left. And you are able to finish your sentence, but not another paragraph. Thank you. Right. Could we have a register of attendance and members' apologies for absence, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor David Bellamy, Councillor Phil Dilks, Councillor Rosemary Caby-Brown, Councillor Charmaine Morgan. Councillor John Cottier will be substituting for Councillor Bellamy and Councillor Paul Wood will be substituting for Councillor Dilks.
Thank you. We don't seem to have Councillor John Cottier yet. Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Do you want me to substitute for John Cottier? Yeah. Oh.
Madam Chairman, can I just make a statement? Obviously, I'm substituting today on the committee. I'd just like to make it clear that on the second item, S210415, I have made my intentions clear on that application, that I wish to speak as a ward member, so I won't take part in the debate and I won't take part in any voting on that item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Woods. And could I have disclosure of interest from anybody, please? Councillor Robert Reed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As Martha Rees will be well aware, I sit on planning and regs at Lincolnshire County Council. I don't see there's any reason of interest, but I feel it ought to be noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reed. And I would like to declare that I've been approached by a couple of members of the public on 2 of the items today, but I come to the committee with a full and open mind. Thank you. Right, we'll go to item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of July 2022. Is everybody happy with those and have they read them? Thank you. Do I have a seconder? So that was proposed by Councillor Ian Selby, seconded by Councillor Harish Bisnell-Singh. All those in favour, please can you put your hands up? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for. Those abstaining? 1.
I
Thank you,
wasn't here, Chair, so I feel that's appropriate.
All right, that's 2 for abstention then. Thank you. Right, we have a number of public speakers today. So, Councillor Judy Smith, will you say who they are, please? Thank you.
Good afternoon, members and members of the public. Application S21 1057, outline application for Class B2 General Industrial and Class B8 Storage and Distribution with associated Class office floor space along with necessary earthworks, landscaping and boundary treatments, access to be considered. Location, Spittlegate level, Spittlegate, Grantham. Speakers, the applicant and applicant's agent, James Ridings and Paul Brailsford. Thank you. Agenda item 5, application reference S21 0415. Description, erection of 16 affordable dwellings and associated infrastructure. Location, land to the north of Doddington Lane, Claypole. District Councillor, Councillor Paul Wood. Parish Council, John Freeman. Against, Dean Revill. And for, applicant, Robert Jays. Agenda item 6, application reference S21 0899. Description, use of land for dog exercising and training, 1.8 metres high fence and parking area. Location, land north of the Lees, Hoff Road, Grantham, Barkston. Parish councillors, no 1 and 4, the applicant's agent, Mike Sibthorpe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to item 4, which is application S21 1057. There has been additional papers on this, so I hope you've read the additional papers as there are remarks from Invest SK and the MOD. I will now go over to our Principal Planning Officer, Chris Brown, for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Planning Committee. The first item to be considered today is S21 1057. The application is for an outline application for Class B2, which is General Industrial, and Class B8, which is Storage and Distribution, with associated Class EGI office floor space, along with necessary earthworks, landscaping and boundary treatments, with access to be considered. The site is at Spittlegate level, Spittlegate in Grantham, and I'm Chris Brown, Principal Planning Officer. The key issues raised as part of the application are the principle of development, impact on the character of the area, impact on the highway, ecology impact, flooding and drainage, and impact on historic assets.
Sorry, Chris, could you just speak a bit closer to the mic? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I will try. The site is located to the south of Grantham, as seen there on the aerial view. And then with a more zoomed in aerial view there, you can see the site consists of 2 fields to the south of Spittlegate Industrial Estate and south of the permitted designer outlet retail permission as well. The site is immediately east of the A1 and west of the B1174, with the site sloping from north to south. And that's the red line plan of the application. And again, please note the contours of the site sloping from north to south from the existing industrial estate to the top of the slide there. Moving on to some photos. So this photo is taken from the southeast corner of the site, looking to the northwest. You can just make out a lorry on the A1 on the left-hand side of the picture there. And again, now taken from the same point, but now looking more slightly northeast with the B1174 there on the right-hand side. This is a view from further north of the site towards the existing Spittlegate industrial estate at the top of the high point there. The new roundabout and Grantham Southern Relief Road Island are just beyond the top of the picture. This is now a view west across the site. Again, the industrial estate can be seen now on the right-hand side of this photo. The spinney or the copse in the centre of that picture is outside of the site boundary and actually west of the A1. So not part of the site at all. There's a further photo taken slightly further down the site, now looking southwest across the bottom of the two fields. And again, now this is a view southwest from the B1174. Access is to be taken just beyond the field gate there, the second field gate on the left-hand side. Now from a similar point, looking back north again towards the industrial estate. For some policy context for the site, there's two maps I've included here. So this one shows the wider site allocation south of Grantham. The site is part of the GRSE1 employment allocation, which is shown in the blue stripes there. The solid red colour is the Spittlegate Heath Garden Village allocation. And then the red diagonal stripes is the Prince William of Gloucester Barracks site allocation. The application site is therefore considered to be of strategic importance to the district due to its site allocation and position in close proximity to both the Grantham Southern Relief Road and the new A1 junction. Moving on, this is a more zoomed in version of the same policy map. The site can be seen to the south of the existing industrial estate, which is highlighted there in the blue dots labelled EMP-G20 and forms approximately 22% of this wider strategic employment allocation. Moving on to the site master plan. This shows the proposal of 3 large buildings across the site. The proposal is for a total of 86,400 square metres, which is 868,000 square feet of employment floor space, split between B2 and B8 uses, together with the ancillary Class E office use. The floor space varies between the 3 buildings, the smallest approximately 18,500 square metres and the largest at just over 43,000 square metres. The buildings vary in height between 18 and 24 metres and are cut into the existing landform, something I'll come on to later, and between 180 metres at the smallest and 294 metres of the largest of the buildings in length. A single access is proposed from the B1174 to the east, together with a new right-hand turn junction, and with a total shown of 769 car parking spaces and 182 HGV spaces shown indicatively on the master plan there. This is the parameters and phasing plan. So the proposal would be phased in development, with phase 1 shown there in blue, with 1 building south of the industrial estate. Phase 2 is shown in yellow, and then phase 3 shown in red, with the final building there. The site sections plan. So this shows the element of earthworks to be undertaken on the site to enable the buildings to be constructed on a flat platform and built into the existing landform as well. So the top view of those 3, this shows the section from northwest to southeast through the scheme, with the larger building, which whilst taller itself, actually sitting lower in the landscape than the smaller building shown on the left-hand side. And then this is also demonstrated in the middle view with the King 31 scheme shown as approved there on the left-hand side, and then the 2 proposed buildings in the centre and on the right-hand side. The proposed elevations are shown indicatively with materials to be conditioned. However, the previous parameters plan shown with the phasing plan, that set the building height and floor levels for the proposal. This is now the proposed illustrative landscaping plan. This shows retention of existing tree and hedgerow planting to the western boundary towards the A1, also to the northern boundary, and retention of sporadic trees to the eastern boundary of the site. In addition, further proposed planting includes significant structural planting to the southern boundary of the site, working with the proposed new site levels. proposed tree and hedgerow planting between the buildings and within the car parking areas, together with proposed meadow and grassland planting to the southern section of the site around an attenuation basin shown. Moving on, this is a perspective CGI aerial view that's been provided by the applicant. So this is taken from north looking south through the site. In terms of landscape impact, during pre-application discussions, 2 key viewpoints were identified in terms of assessing the proposal with the applicant. This first viewpoint here is taken from the south of the site to the west of Little Ponton and close to where the first 2 photos shown were taken from. So this photo montage shows the site as currently. And if I move on, this is shown now with the development, but with no landscaping at all shown. And if I move on again, that's now the same building built, but with the landscaping shown at year 15. The second of these photo montage viewpoints highlighted with the applicant is now taken to the east of the site. This is within the Spittlegate Garden Village site. So as you can see, there's no development on this site at the moment, but it is on the high point now to the southeast of Grantham. The new Grantham Southern Relief Road under construction can be seen on the right-hand side of that photo montage. So again, this is the current view from that particular location with no development on the site. Now again showing the proposed development with no landscaping mitigation. And now thirdly with the landscape mitigation there at year 15 again. This next slide shows the site highlighted there in red and shows the proximity of the site to a number of heritage assets. So these are clustered around Little Ponton to the southeast of the site. And include the Grade 1 listed St Guthlax Church at Little Ponton, and also a scheduled monument shown there with an orange dot immediately to the east of the site. This slide puts those heritage assets into context with the proposal overlaid now on the left-hand side of the slide, and shows the Grade 1 listed Church of St Guthlac highlighted in the centre of the screen there. This next slide is taken from the heritage settings assessment that was provided by the applicant and focused particularly on these 2 heritage assets. So with regard to the impact on St Guthlac's Church at Little Ponton, which is the church in the photos here, the site is not considered to contribute to the significance of the church with a distance of 500 metres between the 2, and the church not a prominent feature in the landscape due to its height and existing tree cover around it. However, with the development, the top portion of the southern, larger of the buildings is considered to be visible from the church and churchyard and would feature in periphery views from the church, as shown here on the slides. The heritage settings assessment provided identifies an effect on the setting of the church to be a change to the experience of the church, where built elements of part of the development are likely to be visible above the distant tree belt, which is to the east side of the site, and featuring views of the church looking northwest from the churchyard. This change to the experience of the church would result in less than substantial harm to the significance of the church and churchyard, identified at the lower end of the scale. With regard to the impact on the setting of the barrow, as shown in the previous slide, the significance of the barrow scheduled monument is predominantly derived from its archaeology value only, and this would not be altered by the proposed development. Further archaeology works on the site is also to be conditioned, with the site identified as having potential for archaeology remains, with this work to include trial trenching and to be phased along with the phasing of the development. Moving on to an evaluation of the site. In terms of the principle of development, the proposal is considered to be in conformity with the local plan policy, with the site forming approximately 22% of a strategic employment allocation GRSE1 identified in the local plan. In terms of landscape impact, this is noted with a local landscape impact to the site and its immediate surroundings. However, due to the falling land levels, existing surrounding landscape and planting, together with further landscaping mitigation and further details to come forward as part of the reserve matters, is not considered to have a harmful wider impact on the wider landscape. No highway impact is also anticipated, with traffic movements equating to 2 to 3 movements per minute to and from the site at peak hours. Highways England have also been in discussions with the applicants at pre-app and application stage and have concluded that the proposed impact upon the strategic road network is acceptable. Significant car parking is proposed, with further details to come forward at reserve matters stage, and a travel plan is also to be secured through a Section 106 agreement with the County Council. No ecological impact is considered, with the site currently a relatively low ecological value, with the majority of boundary trees and hedgerow to be retained to the site and significant further landscaping proposed. This significant further landscape planting, together with the attenuation basin and further mitigation in the form of bat and bird boxes to be put up around the site, is considered to result in a net gain in biodiversity on the site. There are no residential amenity concerns with the application, with the closest dwelling to the northeast of the site just over 300 metres away, and also little visibility between the two sites due to the land levels and the dwelling located on the Witham slope to the east of the B1174. With regards to heritage, Historic England have raised concerns with regard to the impact of the proposal of the setting of heritage assets. The applicant has, however, sought to address this and provided a heritage settings assessment at the request of Historic England. This assessment finds no harm to the setting of the Bolbarrow Scheduled Monument, however, does identify less than substantial harm to the setting of St Guthlax Church in Little Ponton. In line with the MPPF, this less than substantial harm identified at the lower end of the scale is to be weighed against the wider public benefits of the scheme. There's been no objections from any consultees or members of the public. And turning to those wider public benefits of the proposal, the site is allocated for employment use on a strategic employment allocation in the local plan. The site benefits from access to the A1 and is located within the southern growth area of Grantham, together with the Garden Village scheme, the Gloucester Barracks site, along with the Grantham Southern Relief Road. At a split of B2 and B8 uses on the site, the applicant has identified the potential for a scheme to generate 1,727 full-time equivalent jobs, with further jobs growth identified through construction separately. The applicant has verbally confirmed discussions with locally based businesses for future occupation of the site, and the proposal represents a high value investment in the district. The wider public benefits are therefore considered to be significant and strongly weigh in favour of the application. Planning Committee, I wish to draw your attention to the additional items paper with a positive response included from Invest SK, together with a further response from Highways England, a response and additional condition from the Ministry of Defence, and minor amendments to further planning conditions. A further discrepancy in the report has been noted at paragraph 7.1.8. It should be noted that in addition to the designer retail outlet permission that's mentioned in the report, there is also the extant permission for the King 31 industrial scheme reference S08/0448 in addition to this. The application, to conclude, is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you, Chris. And could I ask public speakers, James Riding, please? Thank you. Would you like to come over here to the public speaker desk? And I believe your agent, Paul Brailsford, will answer questions on your behalf. Depending if they're technical or otherwise. Right, okay. I'd just like to come across.
I've got a couple of small questions to ask Chris. I'll do that afterwards, or? Okay, thank you.
Chairman, members, thank you very much and good afternoon. And the opportunity, to speak to you about our exciting proposals, which are set before a background of a recommendation for approval, as you've just heard. My name is James Ridings. I'm a director of Carter Real Estate. We are a locally based company, property company with a strong track record of working with the communities within which we are developing. Our journey at Spittlegate has been one of over 3 years in the making, during which time we have worked alongside your planning team, its colleagues and advisors. Part of that engagement has been through a detailed pre-application process, including presenting to your design pad meetings earlier versions of our proposals and working through their responses and recommendations. The conclusion of this process is that we believe the proposed development you have before you is a true reflection of collaboration with all the key stakeholders. A development that, if permitted, will provide an investment of nearly £100 million situated at one of the key Grantham gateways, over 1,700 new full-time equivalent jobs for local people, an acceptable solution in highways terms, as evidenced in your additional information report. Access by sustainable modes of travel through a travel plan that is secured by a legal agreement, and a development that is generally considered acceptable with regard to detailed assessment of drainage, air quality, archaeology, heritage, and ecology. And finally, the development will provide a pioneering and sustainable environment to attract new businesses to the district and provide space for existing businesses to develop further. As you've heard, we've worked considerably with Invest SK, who've described our proposal as a genuine game changer for Grantham, and stated that Cambridge, Peterborough, Newark, Doncaster have all attracted investment and job creation. This site will allow Grantham to compete on an equal playing field. Thanks to this work with Invest SK and the excitement already generating around our proposals, we have been able to begin preliminary discussions with potential occupiers, both existing and those looking for representation in the district for the first time. The officer's report here is
30 seconds.
The officer's report here is extremely comprehensive, and I very much hope that members will resolve to grant planning permission pursuant to its advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions for the applicant? Sorry, Councillor Wood.
Yeah, just two small questions, Madam Chairman, for Chris. Thank you for your presentation.
No,
Chris.
sorry, we're doing to the applicant first and then we go to Chris.
Okay.
So have you anything for the
No, I haven't
applicant?
anything for the applicant. No, Madam Chairman.
Lovely, thank you. Do I have any other questions for the applicant? No? Thank you very much then. So we now have questions to the officer and debate. Thank you. So questions for the officer. So Paul, Councillor Woods.
I'll try again, shall I?
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Only two simple, thank you, Chris. Only two simple questions, really. It's an outline planning application, yet we show an indicative landscape drawing. What are the implications of that? If you could explain that, why do we show a indicative landscape drawing when it's an outline application? And my second question is another quite small one. On paragraph 10.5, you say the proposal is on balance considered to be in accordance with policies. What can you explain? What is it? Just because planning applications are a balanced decision, is there any significance that you put the word on balance in there? That's all, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Chris, if you'd like to answer those.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Wood. In response to your first point about the level of plans that have been submitted, it's not uncommon. So although it's an outline application, due to the scale of the application, if there hadn't been submitted, we would have asked for the level of detail provided as part of the application anyway. So we can fully assess that. The level of detail submitted is to the extent where, so it's condition, sorry, just bear with me a second. I'll find the relevant condition. I think it's condition 2 for the approved plans. We've then added something further onto that as well to say that everything shall be in accordance with the approved plans. So yes, it's at the bottom of condition 2, reserved matters. So approval of reserved matters shall be obtained by the local planning authority in writing before development is commenced. Then the layout presented at reserved matters shall be in broad accordance with the submitted master plan, with building heights to be in accordance with the submitted parameters plan. And then moving on to landscaping as well. So yeah, so we haven't conditioned the landscaping implementation at all with relation to the landscaping master plan submitted, but soft landscaping implementation is covered under plan condition 13. So that still has to come forward in terms of all the detail. So whilst we've got the broad parameters for the landscaping proposed, we require the further detail in terms of how many of which tree species, for instance, to be planted where, and all of that further detail to come forward as part of condition 13. In relation to the recommendation being an on-balance recommendation, the vast majority of recommendations are always on-balance recommendations because everything is effectively a balancing exercise. With this application, obviously due to the scale of the proposal, there's always going to be factors for and against the proposal. So with this scheme, as outlined, there's significant investment in the district. It's on an allocated site for strategic employment use. However, that's balanced against the concerns outlined by Historic England that from an officer point of view, we consider are suitably overcome. And applying that balancing test, for instance, just on historic assets in the MPPF, we consider that the public benefits of the proposal do identify the less than substantial harm identified in this case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Penny Robbins.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It's just a couple of questions I'd like to ask. 7.712 says the assessment identifies a high potential for archaeological remains. Why therefore on 7.716, page 28, does it only recommend the applicant to commission a scheme of archaeological work? Furthermore, how will we as a planning authority condition the phasing plan on the trial trenching? And another one, shall I wait for the next one?
Can you answer those then, please, Chris, first?
Thanks. Yeah, I'll take that question first. So with regards to the archaeology, so Heritage Lincolnshire have been consulted all the way through. There are archaeology advisors. They were consulted at pre-application stage. And at each stage, the applicant has provided further work in relation to archaeology. The applicant has submitted a proposed trial trenching plan, which covers I've been doing this a long time and I've never seen such a detailed trial trenching plan. There's significant amounts of trial trenching that's going to be required on the site. So there will be a lot of archaeology work across the site as well. That will be phased in relation. So I put up earlier the phasing plan that showed those big colour blocks in 3 phases of the site, and the archaeology will be phased linked with that as well as it comes forward. It is also conditioned. I'm just trying to dig through my report to find the relevant condition. So it's condition 5. So prior to commencement of development, a written scheme of archaeology investigation shall be submitted to improve by us. Evaluation shall initially consist of additional geophysical survey to the southern area, because that was missed off initially, followed by a programme of trial trenching, which shall be phased in accordance with the phasing plan. So there will be extensive earthworks in relation to archaeology across the entire site prior to any building starting in each phase. Thank you.
And would you like to ask your final?
Sorry, another question, just a quick one. 5.114 said Historic England have concerns. What is the applicant doing to mitigate the concerns of Historic England? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, Historic England, they initially flagged up that they do have concerns in relation to the setting of 2 particular heritage assets. So one being the Bolbower Scheduled Monument to the east of the site, and secondly being St Guthlax Church in Little Ponton to the southeast of the site. In relation to that, the main concerns with the applicant initially hadn't provided enough detail in terms of the impact of the proposal on the settings of those 2 key heritage assets. The applicant sought to address that. They commissioned and then submitted to us a heritage settings assessment, which goes into extensive detail to look at the impact of those particular 2 assets. There are other listed buildings around Little Ponton as well, but they were identified early on as having very little, if any, intervisibility between the site and those heritage assets. So that's why the settings assessment focuses on 2 heritage assets specifically, and they're at the higher range of importance as well. So the church is grade 1 listed, and the Bolbower being a scheduled monument. That assessment concludes that in terms of the Bolbower scheduled monument, all its setting, effectively the significance of the setting of that ancient monument, scheduled monument, comes from the archaeology basis, and the scheme won't impact on that. In relation to the church, there was some harm identified. So at the moment, whilst the site doesn't contribute to the setting of the church, if the buildings were to go up, the bottom of the 3 buildings, it's more than likely you'd be able to see just the top of that 3rd building from the setting from the churchyard, for instance. So this assessment undertaken identifies that there will be an interrelationship there between the building and the churchyard. However, that's considered to be less than substantial harm at the lower end of the less than substantial harm scale as well. And in our view, that the significant benefits of the proposal would outweigh that harm. That's a balancing exercise, which off the top of my head is paragraph 202 of the MPPF. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you.
And Councillor Harish Basnell Singh, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. Chris, will it be possible for you to bring the slides where it shows the 3 building, 1 very large building and 2 on the sides, please? The large building that is on the bottom of the site, more or less, towards the south, I take it this is some kind of like a distribution center, sort of a building where lots of lorries would be accessing. And the other 2 building, just slightly smaller in square footage. Will it be of similar type of building storage type of thing? Because I'm concerned in a way with regard to highways. LCC Highways have no objections to the proposal based on the information submitted. Whereas Highways England have raised concerns with the application regarding trip generations. So I would like to know what's to say if there are lots of HGVs turning on that road there, and the access probably will be coming through the town or through the villages.
Chairman, thank you, Councillor. So first of all, Councillor Bisnath-Singh, I'll point you towards the relevant bit of the report with Highways England's response, which, as you mentioned, they have initially raised concerns in relation to the modelling undertaken. However, we've moved through that. So Highways England's response initially was not that they had an objection in essence to the proposal. It was more they did have concerns over the technicalities, if you like, of some of the modelling undertaken and what went into that modelling and how what the outputs of that modelling were. That's since been worked through with the applicant. So the applicant and Highways England have met on a number of occasions since the application was submitted. And in the additional items paper, you'll note, so Highways England have stated, further our recent communication with regards to the high-level assessment, we've now completed the high-level modelling review, which is the modelling undertaken by the applicant. As such, we can confirm that the impact from the development on the SRN, which stands for Strategic Road Network, i.e. the A1 and the A1 junction, locations in the area is expected to be minimal. Therefore, we have no further comments to make at this stage of the application. So just sort of going back from that a bit, in terms of all 3 buildings, whilst you say that the larger one might be strategic distribution and the other 2 slightly different, that's not the case. So it's an outline application for B2 and B8 uses. So the further work done is generally on a 50-50 split because we have to use something to take everything forward. However, that could change. So it could be slightly higher B8 split, slightly higher B2 split, depending on the end users, and the end fit out will depend on the end users of the buildings as well, all to come forward at reserve matters stage. However, everything's modelled on that scenario of high HGV movements, which you mentioned. But then the modelling goes on to say that, I can double check in the report, but I think the figure is of the total PCUs, passenger movements, the 2-way movements for to and from the site, I think 123 in the peak hour will all use the strategic road network. So i.e. they'll go immediately on and off the A1. So they won't travel through Grantham, they won't use any local roads. And then only 23 within a peak hour will effectively be staff movements or other movements backwards and forwards, if you like, within a peak hour to the site that won't use the strategic road network. So a vast proportion of all movements to and from the site, be it employees, be it HGVs, whatever it may be to and from the site, will all use the new A1 junction and straight on and off that. That's why the site would be located here, because they wouldn't locate it anywhere if it didn't have good access to the A1. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Ian Selby.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. Firstly, I'll just say absolutely warmly welcome the 100 million investment into the local economy, and also the 1,700 jobs. I just hope there will be local jobs for local people supporting the local economy. And also an important point to mention with this application is how it will complement the housing that's planned for the local area, you know, that's in the southern area. So yeah, that's certainly a positive, I would suggest. I've got two questions, Madam Chairman. First one, on the additional papers, it talks about the bird strike safety zones from RF Barkston Heath. I'm just wondering what sort of radiuses does that policy you know, come from an RAF base? You know, we're looking probably a couple of miles from as the crow flies, I would have thought, to Barkston Heath. So yeah, I'd be interested to know what sort of radius that is. And my second question is related to the traffic that Councillor Biss-Norsing has asked the question about. I'd appreciate it if you could just repeat those figures again, please, Chris, with regarding the traffic coming in and out of the site. And my question is specific. Looking at the plan that you've got up there, okay, now I'm well aware that the road that it goes past, the Spittlegate Road, is a very, very busy road, and it's the main southern access road to the town. So at certain times of the day, that road becomes very, very busy. I'm well aware of that. So my question is when the traffic come out of the site, specifically out of the site, if, you know, we're looking at high numbers, when you turn right out of the site, that's where I think you could end up with a problem of congestion and, you know, during the busy periods. If the traffic was encouraged, and the words they use the word encouraged, to turn left and go to the roundabout that is probably just a few hundred yards up the road, and then use that roundabout for traffic that wish to go south down the A1, I'm just suggesting to you that might be a better option for to alleviate any traffic congestion coming in and out of the site. And I just think it could be easier if you understand where I'm coming from, Chris. And by the way, thank you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Selby. Can I take your question about the bird strike first, if that's okay? So the Ministry of Defence, their full response is on the additional items paper. So they've identified that the site is approximately 9.75 kilometres southwest from the Barkston Heath airfield. In relation to what zone they use, if you like, what distance they use to ask for further bird strike information, I don't know, unfortunately. It's just obviously with this case, they've identified within 10 kilometres, they have asked for that further information. They haven't objected as such, they've just asked through a planning condition that a further information is submitted in terms of bird strike. And there's a minor amendment to the drainage condition they've requested as well, in terms of that one. Moving on, if I may, to the highways issues, if I could draw your attention to so this is paragraph 7.4.3 and 7.4.4, and I'm on page 21 of the agenda. So 7.4.3 states the majority of trips will use the GSRR, which is Grantham Southern Relief Road, a new junction onto the A1 to access the strategic road network, which have been designed to have sufficient capacity. If I keep going for a further bit, the majority of trips will use the strategic road network with only 1 to 2 vehicles forecast to be generated on average every minute. So unlikely to be perceptible to highway users. And then further talks about the two-way trips equating to 2 to 3 vehicles every minute. Then to the north of the new B1174 roundabout, they were the figures I mentioned earlier of 123 passenger car units generated by proposal, with then only 23 using the local road network as opposed to the strategic network. In terms of your point about going north and south, turning out of the access, effectively all inbound traffic to the site will be coming from the north. So from the new A1 junction onto the Grantham Southern Relief Road, south down the B1174 and into the site with a new right turn lane there as well, for turning in and out of the site. For exiting the site, obviously your northbound traffic will do exactly the same route in reverse, back up to the A1 that way of the new roundabout and on the new road linking to the A1. For southbound A1 traffic, it is possible that they may turn right out of the site and go straight down that road. But effectively that road almost, it's not quite a full feeder lane onto the A1, but it does, if you just carried on straight, I think there is the stop at the bottom of the hill, but otherwise it just goes straight through onto the A1 that way. I appreciate there's a local left turn that heads off into Little Ponton, but we would consider that little left turn there to be incredibly low use. It's not really even a village road, to be honest. It's just sort of a little road that heads off to the small hamlet of houses at Little Ponton.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Penny-Milnes.
Thank you. I think most of my questions have been answered, but one little one. Is it a 24-hour site? I'm thinking of overnight parking and where, if there are timings when lorries come and go, because we have had problems, haven't we, of lorries not being allowed onto a site and then causing problems parking up. I just wondered if there was any consideration of that. And also, I'd just like to reaffirm the concerns over heritage. It's obviously a very important site for heritage. There should be lots and lots of archaeology pops up there. What happens when they do a trial trenching and they find something? Then what happens? And does work have to stop whilst they investigate further? And any fines, where do they end up? Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Interesting questions. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Milnes. In relation to the use of the site, it's almost certain that an element of the site will be B8 storage and distribution, and there will therefore have a 24-hour operation. That may apply to the whole site. It may apply just to one or two of the buildings or all three of the buildings. But effectively, that will all come forward at a later stage through reserve matters when we know the final sort of design of the buildings, the final kit out of the buildings effectively internally. In terms of the vehicle use of the site and particularly HGV parking, again, that's something we'll seek to address at reserve matter stage or later through conditions on from reserve matter stage, because again, that will depend on the final occupiers of the site and the final use of the site, which at this outline stage, we don't have that information as yet. In terms of the archaeology point and trial trenching, you are correct. So there will be significant trial trenching across the site. And when I say significant, a large portion of the site will be dug up and trial trenched all the way across it from the information that the applicant submitted. In terms of if they were to find anything, then yes, effectively it will be phased. So it won't all be in one go. But within that phase, work will continue to effectively dig up or further process the finds. The finds don't tend to sort of hang around on site. They then sort of go away for further analysis elsewhere. So yeah, work can still continue, archaeology work can still continue on site while other work's going on in the background, if you like. And in terms of then storage and what happens to them, I'm pretty sure the county, well, it's Heritage Lincolnshire, our consultants, but I'm pretty sure it's the county council. I'm happy to be corrected by any other officers, or if anybody else knows them better than me. It would more than most certainly be the county council that would then hold that. The applicant would have to pay for all of that. So if there was anything significant that came out of it, the applicant would most likely be asked to contribute to the further storage of that particular item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other questions or debate from anybody? Everybody's, oh, Penny again. Thank you, Councillor Milnes.
If we're going into debate, I mean, obviously this is a very exciting project. I again echo Councillor Wood's question, why an outline on allocated land when we've had to go into such detail to analyse what's on offer? That surprises me. I'd have thought, you know, we could go straight to a full application. That's obviously quite a technical comment, and I accept whatever the reply is, but I think it's something I would like to bottom at some point. It is exciting, the heritage. I'm sure there will be some good finds. Maybe they'll end up in the collection in Lincoln, you know, and we can all go and have a look. I believe there could be from Iron Age, Roman, you know, it'll be a busy site from the heritage point of view. Yes, I like it. I think the buildings, we see a lot of them down the A1, don't we? These flat grey buildings that seem to blend reasonably well. I'm sure the trees will take quite a long time to grow up. That's the only problem, to screen it. I don't know how long that'll take. But I don't suppose you can do much else about that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good scheme. As long as we don't get overnight parking problems, then yeah, fine. Sorry to be slightly jolly about it, but it is a very nice scheme, so it's very good.
Thank you. And I think your first part there had already been answered by Chris with Paul. Councillor Woods, again.
Yeah, Madam Chairman. Yeah, just to say, I fully support the scheme. It seems an ideal scheme. Seems a no-brainer to me, actually. I know that there's always things to look at, architectural things and traffic and all things like that. Chris has done a very good report. I must admit, I agree with Councillor Mills. I can't see why it's an outline application, but it is. That's what we're judging, so I realise that. I fully support it. It's a great job. It's in the right area. It's an investment. Few little problems can be sorted out as I see it, so I fully support it. I'd like somebody to propose it, but I probably won't propose it because I'm a substitute. But if somebody else would, I'd be quite happy to second it.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we had Jackie Smith propose it there, and Penny Milnes, Councillor Penny Milnes. Right, and Penny Milnes seconded, thank you. And Penny Robbins, Councillor Penny Robbins, you wanted?
Sorry, can I just ask one more question? Would you mind? I do fully support it, definitely. It's just one question I'd like answering. On page 40, could you explain the rationale behind the phasing, just for me to know? It seems back to front to me that phase 3, surely phase 3 should be finished first and work back to the road. I understand due to the drainage, etc., but I'm struggling to understand why you want to have a development finished and yet traffic trundling through.
Thank you, Councillor. With regards to the phasing, that's what's been proposed to us by the applicant. So the two blue bits on page 40. So effectively, one of the buildings next to the industrial estate would be first. I think that's first because that includes the access road. So that's the first bit that needs to go in, which again is also shown as part of that blue. And that access road would go up to the furthest point as well, the red bit. And then the bottom bit in blue is shown because that's the further drainage and landscaping that would be required for the whole site, if you like, not just for the first phase. The second phase shown in yellow rather than the third phase shown in red. In terms of which bit comes forward, the applicants put obviously the larger of the three buildings in the yellow and wishes that come forward first. Obviously, in terms of the access would go directly to building 2 or phase 2. The third bit coming third, I appreciate what you're saying, that the traffic will then trundle past phases 1 and 2 to get to phase 3 in terms of the build out of it. I don't see that being a particular issue. If phases 1 and 2 are up and running already, they'll already generate a lot of traffic. The build out for phase 3 would probably generate less traffic in terms of the build out phase than actually an operational phase. So I wouldn't see a build out phase in terms of traffic impacts, particularly impacting on the other 2 phases, really. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Robert Reed.
Thank you. I'm slightly confused. We're asking questions of the officer, and are we following on by debate, or
We've slightly changed it perhaps since you last come. We do the debate and questions to the officers all as one. It saves time.
Okay, I'll do debate then as well as questions. Okay. To me, this application seems very sensitively balanced because it is a great opportunity with scoping to get both light industry and, as fellow councillors mentioned, housing development into quite an orderly way, and it will hopefully, I'm sure other people will share with me the confidence that the overall situation at the end will end up much better than Alma Park has done at present. So It mirrors the images application in itself with developments further north around Newark, and I would endorse and agree with the economic developments that it will bring to the Grantham economy as well. I think that's absolutely wonderful. I think in the report at 72.2.14 that the indicative landscaping and master plan is all there in place, and that is something of great comfort. The local plan with EM1 policy is there, and above all, we see the confidence and confirmation in the design pad pre-app, which has been done both sensitively and fully. So on the strength of all of those considerations, I would be happy to support the application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't think there is any more debate, is there? No. So we'll go to the vote. Go on then quickly, Councillor Selby.
Just a quick another positive for this application, Madam Chairman, just touching upon what Councillor Reed has mentioned about Halma Park. At least with this site, the traffic to get to the site won't have to go through the town like it does for Halma Park, and you don't get the heavy traffic going through the housing estates and what have you. So, you know, that is absolute positive. And just to say, I've often agreed with the thoughts of Councillor Penny Robbins, you know, with the way they build these developments. I know with housing developments, they tend to build them from the front. But I've always thought, yes, it would be better coming from the back. So I totally agree where she's coming from. This application, Madam Chairman, as I mentioned, the investment, I think is absolutely wonderful for the town and for the area. As I say, especially for the jobs that it's going to create. So, yeah, I'm very much supportive of this, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, we will go to the vote. So we've had a proposer, Councillor Jackie Smith, seconded. Yes.
Yes, I think this is a major development and investment for the people of Grantham, the surrounding and everything. And it's something that we've been waiting for a long, long time. I can remember coming down the hill from the top of the barracks to a place called Grantham, which was full of smoke from developing buildings that had been doing all sorts of things during the war, and was then struggling to take it forward. And so it gives me very great pleasure indeed to support this application and promote the development. It's something Grantham has needed for a long time, and I will be one of the first to have a really good shout for joy when it gets completed. I won't be around, but I'll do it from up there. Thank you.
Well, let's hope you are around. Would you like to turn your mic off? So finally, we will go to the vote. Can I have all those in favour, please raise your hands, please. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. That's been approved. We will go on to the next item then, thank you. And that's agenda item 5. And we have Phil Jordan presenting. Thank you very much. If you're ready to start then, thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good afternoon, members. As already introduced, this next application is reference S21-0415, the proposal is for the erection of 16 affordable dwellings and associated infrastructure. The site's located on land to the north of Doddington Lane, Claypole, and I'm Phil Jordan. So, as always, the detailed assessment of the application is set out in the committee report. There's no additional items to report on, so if members do need to refer to any of the detail, it's all set out in that main agenda pack. I won't read out every single one of those sort of chapter headings there, but I think perhaps just highlight for this particular application, it's probably the principle of development to consider affordable housing and the need surrounding that, design and visual impact, residential amenity. I think they're the sort of the main considerations that I'll try to go through and go through some of the key issues with those through this presentation. So this is the site, or this is Claypole. Just try to sort of show a bit of context there really around the site itself. I can just try and get my cursor on there. Yep. So the application site is this red sort of rectangular shape where my cursor is at the moment. Members that came on the site visit will there he is. Recall we sort of parked on this corner here and we actually walked into that larger field, and then we walked through the sort of the gap in the hedgerow and had a good look around the site at this point here. It's sort of worth pointing out the top of the field, which isn't or is outside the scope of this application, is in the same ownership of the applicant, and the larger field adjacent to the site that we walked through, that's subject of a separate application that we've got in at the moment, and that separate application will also come to planning committee. But this, we need to sort of look at this site and the merits of this application in its own right, rather than sort of consider those potential additional developments around the site. Again, I won't go through sort of every one of those markers on the plan there. It just sort of points out some of the services and facilities that there are in Claypole. I'll come on to it later. Claypole is set out in the local plan as a small village, although I think it's sort of fair to say it's sort of at the larger end of the small villages, and I think that the plan there just shows some of the services and facilities that you have got in the village. But in terms of the plan itself, it is designated as a smaller village. Again, this is the same image and just shows the site a bit closer up. You can see where the access would be there off Doddington Lane, and then you can see the public right of way that runs through the adjacent site. You can just see that sort of the marking on the field there where the sort of the trodden path is. There isn't any formal path that goes through there. It's just a public right of way that exists through that field. This is the location plan, so you can see there the land outlined in red. That's the accurate outline rather than my sort of crude rectangular I drew on those aerial plans. That's the extent of the site as proposed, and the blue line there, that's the further land to the north of the site that's in the applicant's ownership. This is the layout as proposed. So you can see 16 dwellings altogether. You can see the sort of where the access comes into the site. This sort of attenuation feature here that I'm just highlighting, that this is part of the drainage strategy. This would be a sort of a pond that helps effectively slow down the drainage. It would be wet at times, but it's basically sat there to sort of hold that water in storm events and then allow the flow to be discharged at a slower rate. You've got 4 bungalows within the plot. I've got a 3D image that just shows the site, sort of will help you visualize the site a bit better than this 2D plan. But there are 4 bungalows within the scheme. And then you've got the adjacent properties there. You can just see to the left on More Close. I think sort of worth pointing out that this property here, there is a sort of a extension on the back there that we saw on site, which isn't shown on this plan, that does sort of run close to that that hedgerow there. So there you go. That always helps a bit better than a 2D plan. So I think some sort of important things to point out really. It set out in the report the design process that the scheme went through, both at pre-app and then during the life of the application. And I think certainly one of the important characteristics of this part of the village and the site itself are these hedgerows, the frontage hedgerow here, and then particularly this hedgerow that defines that field boundary, are both very mature hedgerows and certainly positive features in the landscape that help add to that sort of rural character. So I think it was seen that it was important to retain those. To the north of the site, where the development or the extent of the development would finish, we've required a further hedgerow to be planted along there, which is shown on the landscaping strategy plan. I think again that was seen as important to sort of help continue that sort of rural appearance of the site. What isn't shown on this visualization, because it's sort of an older version, again tried to sort of further soften the visual impact of these 2 properties here, which would have had sort of exposed gable ends as you approach the village from Doddington Lane. And so there was these have now had sort of hipped roofs put on these the end of these gable ends to help sort of mitigate some of that visual impact. Earlier versions of the plan had sort of multiple access points to the frontage properties, and again that was designed out to help retain as much of this frontage hedgerow as possible. I think it's we'd looked at this on site, where the roadway comes into the site, it does run close to this property here, and there would be some impact on the amenity of that property. That said, the benefit of having the roadway there is that you get sort of significantly better separation distances than you would do in a development proposal of this type ordinarily, where you would typically get properties backing onto the adjacent land. So you've got a good sort of separation between the built form because of that roadway, and then clearly here, because you've got the bungalow, you don't have those overlooking issues. And these properties further up are sort of set 35 metres away from the adjacent neighbours. So in sort of terms of the built form, that you've got some good separation distances there. I think in terms of the amount of traffic that would come in here, it would be relatively low. 6 of the 16 properties are sited on the front here, and so the traffic would come in and immediately turn right. It's only these further properties to the rear of the site that would go past those existing properties. And like I say, you have got relatively low vehicle movements for a scheme of this size. And again, clearly you've got some existing traffic flow on Doddington Lane itself, it's sort of in the existing situation. So I won't dwell too long on these next set of plans. These are the individual house types themselves. So you can see this is the first property, which is a sort of semi-detached bungalow. And then you have got these semi-detached 2-storey properties. This is a short terrace of two-storey property that's situated to the rear of the site. This is the second bungalow type. And then that's the housing that's now had the hip to roof added. Another sort of aspect of the development, there is some off-site highway improvement works which are proposed. So fundamentally what that does is it connects up a pedestrian footpath along Doddington Lane to the existing footway that ends roughly where my cursor is there. And then there's also this addition of a further passing place along Doddington Lane. Those improvement works are secured by a condition. There's two conditions, one that secures the implementation, and then the second condition sort of requires full detailing of whether that would be a lit pedestrian footway and the engineering details. So just to go through the evaluation, as I say, that this really just picks out some of the key points really. As I've already said, Claypole is defined as a smaller village in the local plan, but the principle of development is acceptable for those type of settlements in two ways. One is through infill policy, which is SP3, but in this case, edge of settlement proposals that are rural exception sites, again, are acceptable in principle, subject to various criteria. A key part of that for an affordable scheme such as this is evidencing affordable housing need, and that's been done in a combination of ways with this application. The applicants carried out a local housing needs survey. They've liaised with the council's affordable housing officer. There's that sort of inherent need for affordable housing in any case that's evidenced through the SHMA. Someone's bound to ask, that's the strategic housing market assessment, and that's effectively the document and the evidence base that underpins all of the local plan in terms of housing need. And then the council's housing register itself, which is a register of everyone who effectively wants to or is seeking a council house property. And there's a sort of an extract showing everyone who either lives in Claypole or has a connection to Claypole as sort of part of the evidence for affordable housing need. So the summary of that is that it's considered that a suitable or a sufficient amount of evidence has been put forward that demonstrates there is a need for the number and the type of properties for this development. I've talked a bit about the design of the scheme, mainly through that 3D visualization. There were some improvements to the design and some both through the pre-app and the design pad process. I think it's accepted, as with all types of development such as this, that there will certainly be some impact on that existing rural character of Doddington Lane, but that's been mitigated as much as possible through both retaining the existing hedgerows and further trying to enhance them with additional planting. Again, except there would be some impact on the neighbouring properties, primarily through that access. But again, what that allows is that sort of good separation distance, which is better than you would typically expect in this type of environment. That relationship between the access and the neighbouring properties has been further mitigated through some tree planting or proposed tree planting along that part of the access way into the site. Just a few of the sort of technical points and where these are covered by conditions. The principles of the drainage strategy are considered to be acceptable. That's a combination of swales, so that's the sort of the source control, and then surface water is further attenuated through those pond features before discharging into the existing Anglian water drain at a restricted discharge rate. The sustainable building policy, SB1 in the plan, the details of that for this scheme are secured by condition 3. Off-site highway improvement works I've already talked about, and again, any details of lighting would be required and considered under condition 10. Landscaping plan has been put forward, similar to the sort of the question that was asked last time, that the principles of that landscaping strategy are considered to be acceptable. What the condition does is picks out the detail, and that, you know, the detail goes down to the species of the tree and exactly where and how old that tree is, and, you know, the technical details of how it's actually planted. So that is required by condition. There's also a further condition that requires details of a landscape management strategy, which again is seen as important in this instance. With it being an affordable scheme, there would be a landscape management company on the site, and that management plan would pick up things like the long-term maintenance and management of those hedgerows. The parking provision within the site is two off-road parking spaces per dwelling is considered to be acceptable for this type of development. And then there's also through the landscaping condition, there's a requirement for the applicant to provide details of secure cycle storage, as well as electric charging points, which are secured by that sustainable building condition. So the recommendation is the application should be approved, subject to the conditions set out in the main report and the completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure the affordable housing detail for the scheme. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Phil, for your presentation. And could I ask Councillor Paul Wood to speak now, please? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. This application at Claypole is situated in my ward, and I'm speaking against the application, which is against the officer's recommendation. I ask you to refuse the application. In my view, there are several issues about the application that give me cause for concern and also give the residents of Claypole concerns. Reading the reports, and I've read the reports, and I know there are reasons put forward for approval and some for refusal. I think the reasons for approval are more related to the strategic needs of SKDC. But when considering sites that are not in the local plan, I think it should give greater priorities to local needs. Now, as a ward member, I always believe in putting forward my views. And I don't just attend this committee, the planning committee, to raise objections. And recently I attended a meeting to support the application of 50 properties in Longbennington. So I've got a very open mind on these things. I don't like to actually come here and object unless there are good reasons to object to it. But I think on this application, there are good reasons to refuse it, despite what the planning officer says. The first thing is a local plan. Claypole is designated a smaller village, and the site is not included in the local plan for development. The local plan identified several sites in various locations to provide dwellings and affordable housing. Claypole was not deemed suitable for a major development. This is a major development. Policy SP2 refers to small-scale developments with substantial support from the local community. This site doesn't have support from the local community and is not a small scale. The local plan was based on the council's own evidence of housing needs, and no sites in Claypole are identified. It's referred to as the edge of settlement site. To me, the site is situated outside the village. It's beyond the 30-mile-an-hour signs and beyond the entrance to actually Claypole. It is on the very edge outside the village, on a single track lane. It is adjacent to existing properties on Moor Close, but there are no connections into that development. It is not well connected to the existing build form, and in my view extends
30
the
seconds.
development into open countryside. It is contrary to SKDC Local Policy 213. Local affordable housing needs under Policy SP4, rural exception sites must be evidenced as the most suitable. This is not a suitable site. Other sites should be investigated. The housing survey also covered the villages of Claypole and the surrounding areas. The survey did not produce a good result, and I don't think it backs up.
3 minutes.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I'm allowed 5, aren't I? I'm allowed 5 minutes, aren't I? Yeah. Okay, so I don't quite have to speed up anyway. Policy SP4 refers to the local needs, and I say it does not allow rural exception sites to be supported by needs in other settlements. If housing needs are identified in, say, Stamford or the Deepings, then in my view, it's not acceptable to satisfy those needs by building dwellings in Claypole, some 40 miles away, just to produce a statistical result. We don't, the people, if we need housing needs, we need to be building the properties where they're wanted. There's also large-scale development adjacent to Claypole, Newark and Sherwood, where they're building a massive building programme, and they've granted permission for thousands of houses, including affordable homes. I know I'm asking you to go against the planning officer's recommendations, which is difficult for the committee, I realise that, and you need to have good reasons. I think there are good reasons. So I'd ask you, please think carefully about the points I've raised. Refuse the application for the following reasons. The site is not identified in SKDC's local plan. It's a very, very edge of settlement location, in my view, outside the village, with not good connections to the village. School children will have to walk considerable way to get to the school. It is not, I don't think it's supported by local needs or the surveys. I know the planning officer thinks it does and has put evidence forward, but to me, the local parish council have produced their own surveys that don't justify it. And there are affordable homes already planned adjacent to Claypole. In all, I'm sorry to say, but I'm against it, and I would ask the committee to refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Woods. And can I ask Councillor John Freeman from the Parish Council to come and speak, please? Thank you. Yes, please. And push the yellow button on the mic. Oh.
Before I start, Chair, can I just make a small procedural point? As you appreciate, it's very difficult in 3 minutes to present evidence that ran to 33 pages from the Parish Council. But it might have been helpful to me to be warned or alerted that I would have the right to produce slides to present to you. A member of the public who asked to speak got a letter to that effect after 2 emails and a phone call to Democratic Services to ask them to confirm that I was going to be able to speak. All I got was a 1-line email saying, yes, you're down to speak. Nobody any time alerted me to that right, to the right to produce some slides, which would have been helpful to me and to the committee. So I am a bit disadvantaged, I think, at this point. But I just wanted to
well, I apologise for that, and I shall look into that. Thank you. But if you'd like to start your speech now, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, my name is John Freeman. I'm the Chair of Claypole Parish Council. I understand that the business of today is that planning applications must be consistent with the local plan as written, as subject to consultation, as scrutinised, as approved by this committee. The Parish Council's presentation gave a clear analysis of how this application is inconsistent with the local plan on many grounds. It wasn't just the 5 short paragraphs in the planning officer report. As I say, it runs to 33 pages of detailed evidence. It's common ground that this application can only be approved as an edge of settlement development under SP4. SP4 sets out 6 conditions that must be met. The first one is that there's public support, which there's not. Indeed, the community is positively opposed to this development. SP4 then says that if that condition isn't met, then 4 more conditions are required to be met. That's 9 in all 4 out of 9 won't do, not even 8 out of 9 won't do, all 9 must be met. And yet they're clearly not. I've only time for one example. Point G, the proposal must be, I quote, evidenced by local need and affordability from an appropriate housing needs survey. The applicant's survey was carried out by Community Links, and even though it was distributed to not just Claypole, but 4 additional villages to try to boost numbers, it in fact fails to support the application. I don't know quite what the planning officer has read, but the conclusion it reaches is that, I quote, a small demand for affordable homes in this parish cluster within the next 5 years. And the report then goes on to make another recommendation way forward, which I'll come back to in a moment. So the application fails, SP4. The planning officer then wants to substitute evidence by reference to the housing register. Nowhere in the local plan is the housing register referred to. And in any case, the housing register doesn't support this application, and neither does the housing register support the comments made by the Affordable Homes Officer. What this application is clearly about, and we understand the pressure on the housing officer, on the planning officer, is the need to provide 244 affordable homes. He says these 16 affordable homes would provide a significant contribution towards that need. Well, I think that's just a bit cynical. It's not strategic, it's opportunist. You build affordable homes where there are jobs, transport and services. You don't stick them in a little village, small village in the far northwest corner of the district. That's a betrayal of the communities around Grantham, Bourne, the large towns and villages that actually need these properties. You should put them where they need them. And incidentally, Claypole's population is about 1% of the districts. That maybe is 2.4 affordable homes are justified. Shortly, this committee will have the opportunity to look at S210655, an application by Minster
3 minutes.
to put 43 homes on land already designated in Long Bennington. That's the local service centre for Claypole, and meets the recommendation of the Community Links Housing
Thank you
Needs Survey.
very much. You've had your 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
And could I have Dean Revel, please, come and speak? Yeah. Can you just wait so we can wipe down? Thank you.
Loud voice anyway, don't worry about that. Before I start, can I ask that you actually look at the slides that I gave to Mr. Jordan and read them afterwards? The first slide, forget about it. In 3 minutes, we haven't got time to discuss that. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman.
If you'd like to start, thank you.
Committee. I'll start now. I was on Claypole Parish Council in 2012 when 10 affordable houses were built by Waterloo Housing Association. I supported the application as part of the Parish Council, and the evidence supplied from the Affordable Homes Register, then from South Kesteven District Council, said there was an identified need for Claypole. Being on the Parish Council supporting that application when there was a lot of opposition in the village got me a lot of flack. And after the development was finished, I made a point of making a freedom of information request to see what actual local connections were the people who were in the property. It turned out that one person in the 10 properties had a local connection to Claypole. And when I questioned the housing officer at the time, I was told that because no one else on the housing register qualified, they said the field was spread further out throughout the county to fill the properties. That doesn't give anybody an impression of a local need. it is said that the housing survey for this application identifies a local need. I showed the data to my 15-year-old daughter, and she had a look at it, and she said, "Dad, Mark Twain said there are three types of things. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics." The interpretation of the document, the survey document, is it's unbelievable. There's 824 surveys were issued, and there were 155 responses. Of those 155 responses, only 23 can be identified by postcode as having come from Claypole. Claypole has 560 properties. Therefore, the response to the survey from Claypole residents equates to 4.2%. There are no details of what percentage of these respondents required.
30 seconds.
Sorry. Oh, okay. The location of the proposed development creates an artificial insight infill development, which is just callous. Yeah, it's a terrible indictment of the planning policy when you create the opportunity for a developer to just go on and
Thank you. That's your
develop again.
time. You've had your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask now the applicant, Robert Jays, please? Thank you. When you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee today in support of this planning application. My name is Robert Jays and I work for the Linden Group, and I am the agent for this application submitted on behalf of Platform Housing. Platform Housing are one of the largest registered providers outside London who own and manage over 47,000 properties across the country. They have a long-standing working relationship with SKDC and have in the region of 200 houses in the district. I would like to place on record my thanks to the planning officer on this scheme, both for his hard work during the planning application process and for his thorough presentation and report to the committee. We welcome his recommendation for approval. This site is one that the Linden Group have been involved with for a number of years now, with the intention of delivering a scheme of affordable housing. As demonstrated by the Housing Needs Survey and confirmed by the feedback from the Council's Housing Partnership Officer, there is a proven need for affordable housing in Claypole. The fully affordable housing scheme before you today will help meet this need, with the 7 affordable rented units and 9 shared ownership units being available for people with a local connection to Claypole and the surrounding area in perpetuity. The development will therefore have a significant social benefit to the area. In preparation of the plan application, we've actively engaged with both the District Council and the Parish Council. We've had several meetings with the parish and have shared information, including the housing needs survey we completed. Where possible, we've tried to alleviate the concerns raised, but what is clear and made evident today is that there is a difference in opinion on the principle of this development. It is, however, worth noting that there is also local support for the scheme, including support for new housing development in the village from the head teacher of the local primary school. The scheme has gone through a rigorous design process with active involvement from the council's planning team and design officer. We have made a number of changes to the scheme through this process, with the result being proposals that are of high quality in design and will be an excellent addition to the settlement. The Linden Group are active and experienced in the principles of sustainable development and are comfortable with the sustainable building principles and requirements of policy SD1 mentioned by the planning officer. The planning officer has clearly identified the important issues with our planning application, and I don't intend to repeat what he has said, but is detailed in our planning application and confirmed in the officer's report. The application proposals conform to policy at both a national and local level. Specifically, the policy conforms to the rural exception scheme criteria of policy SB4. The social benefits of delivering a fully affordable housing scheme at this time should not be underestimated. with the need for affordable housing extremely high, particularly following the financial issues brought about by COVID-19. Platform
30
housing have
seconds.
funding in place to support the delivery of the scheme, and a start on site can be achieved quickly should approval be supported today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And can I start with any questions, please, to the agent? No. Thank you very much then.
Thank you.
Do I have questions for the officer? Councillor Robert Reed, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This application, to some extent, troubles me. So I shall be listening to any other members in debate. But my first question to the officer relates to the 106 agreement contributions. Clearly, there's not the 30% because it's all affordable, but it is an agreement with 106 contributions. I can't see them in here, so I can't see anything to do with schooling or health or what are you able to give us any answer, any guideline on that to start with?
Yes, so we consulted with Lincolnshire County Council in relation to the education requirements, and they effectively came back and said the school has capacity, the village school, and there were no needs, for education. So that's why there isn't any in that respect. There was a similar response from health. So again, we consult with the NHS, and we need their evidence to justify making those requests. The only other sort of typical, other than the affordable housing, is open space contributions. Within the site itself, the applicant has provided an excess in terms of the open space requirements that would be required by the policy. It could be justified that we could seek contributions for sort of small play equipment or play area site within the development. But for a development of this size, it would effectively equate to what would be a lap, which is, can be an unequipped play area. There is a good size play area within the village itself, albeit sort of slightly beyond where we would normally want the walking distance to be. I think it's shown to be about 800 metres away. But effectively, in relation to open space or play equipment, it's not felt justified that we could make requests under Section 106. And if they don't meet those legal tests, then we're not justified, and legally we can't make them. So it would just be securing the affordable housing through the legal agreement.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay, if I may move on then. Thank you, Chairman. So social integration into the village, SP4, edge of settlement. For my mind, platform housing is to be heralded. I think the application is very much in the development has got open space, 4 bungalows, again, to be very much welcomed. But I do really still remain troubled with SP4, edge of settlement. And we have SP4 to consider for those applications we're for, and also for those applications that we're against. And then it's the application before us, but there is a field behind, exclamation mark. So I'm still weighing up my decision at this moment in time. And I'd be interested in other people's, other committee members' dimensions on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reed. Councillor Selby.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. Quite enjoyed my visit to Claypole. Very, very rarely I get to that neck of the woods, Madam Chairman. It's one of those villages where I think you have to go out of your way to get to it. You know, you have to probably have a reason to go in that direction. Normally you're straight up the A1 to Newark, or you go the other direction towards Lincoln. So it's not often I get to that. And I have to say, it's a bigger village than I'd originally thought and anticipated it was. I enjoyed my drive through, and I thought, yeah, this is really nice village. So from that perspective, yeah, I thought excellent. So I've got two sort of questions here, Madam Chairman. One is in relation to the plot itself. Now, when you look at the shape of the village, for me, I don't see this as being outside the periphery of the village. So SP4, I would question whether this is really edge of settlement. Yeah, it's on the edge of the village, but it's not outside the periphery of the village. In my view, I would suggest, and I would appreciate the officer's comments on that. And I would asking, is this really a major development? Because when you look at the 3D slide that came up, which I thought was excellent, I have to say, it looks to me a very low density. And I would like to ask the officer's opinion of whether this is low density for the size of the plot. Because, you know, we see a lot more high density properties, you know, for that size of the plot, and 16 properties, all affordable, 4 of them bungalows, as Councillor Reed has pointed out as well. You know, I just think it could be a lot worse application, in my view. Affordable properties, and this comes on to one of my questions. One of the other questions is, and I come from a village, Madam Chairman, that had a shortage of affordable housing, and when you have that shortage, you can lose an element of identity in a village. Some of these villages, they have a connection that goes back generations. My own family in Skillington goes back 7 generations. And if you've got affordable housing where you've got that local connection, I've got access to it, you keep that identity within a village. And that's so important in my view, Madam Chairman. So my question, my other question is this: can you give us an assurance, please, that local need will be put first and foremost? As it's been mentioned by one of the gentlemen that spoke, the importance of that. And I would like an assurance, please, Madam Chairman, that is the case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you get all those questions in there, Phil?
So yeah, I'll try and answer those questions, and I think just address a couple of points as well that have been raised both in the public speaking and through the debate already. I think the first point is around what's the appropriate policy. I think Councillor Wood referenced, you know, it could be considered this is outside of the village, and if members agreed with that, then the relevant policy test would be under policy SP5, which is development in the open countryside. My advice is strongly that I consider this to be an edge of settlement development. It clearly abuts against existing development where the current 30 mile an hour speed limit is in the village. I don't see that as relevant. So that is a judgment call to make, is what is the appropriate policy. And again, I stand by the advice that this is an edge of settlement site and therefore it falls to be considered under policy SP4. Just to sort of, I appreciate this wasn't one of your questions, Councillor Selby, but it has been referenced a couple of times about a lack of substantial support. And again, just to be very clear on that point, that isn't a requirement for this type of development proposal. So if you read the detail of policy SP4, criterion A requires demonstration of substantial community support, but that's only for market-led schemes. This has been promoted as a rural exception scheme. It's an affordable only scheme, and it clearly states under that policy that rural exception schemes are an exception to criterion A, And it goes on then to set out what they need to do in terms of demonstrating local need. Your question then, Councillor Selby, what is local need? And again, we have this debate sometimes. In this instance, we need to be clear that local need is local to the immediate settlement and surrounding area, and there isn't any definition in the local plan, but it is covered in the report. That's generally accepted to be either existing residents or individuals or families with some connection to the settlement itself. So we are looking at fundamentally, has the applicant demonstrated there is a need for this number of properties? Appreciate what's been said and accept the parish council have put forward an alternative position to the applicant. What I would say is that the various criteria of policy SP4 aren't quite as simple as it's a tick box exercise and you tick them all and it's approved, you don't tick them, it's refused. We have to look at not just the individual criteria for the policies holistically, we have to look at all the policies in the plan. And as was said with the last application, we're often making a balanced judgment. I think what members do need to consider is, has the applicant demonstrated there's a sufficient need for a sufficient local need? And when I say local need, I'm talking about those with a connection to Claypole or those already resident in Claypole for this number of properties. My advice, which is based on the expert advice from the councils, what I'm going to refer to as affordable housing officer, but project partnership officer, is that has been done, and that's collectively through a local housing needs survey that was carried out in 2017, a further survey that was carried out in 2019, the extract from the council's housing register, details from the SHMA, and as I say, just those discussions with the council's affordable housing officer. If members want to come to a sort of a different conclusion on that point, that would need to be supported by evidence as to why there isn't that local need. As I've said, I've set out in the report why I consider that has been met, but appreciate alternative arguments have been put forward. The question about major development, 16 dwellings is major development. So by the definition of major development, that would be 10 dwellings or more. So it is a major development proposal. That isn't a limiting criteria by policy SP4. The limitations of SP4 are, does the proposal put forward meet that local need, which we've already talked about. And then the final point about density, the density of the scheme is...
Excuse me, can you be quiet in the back? You've had your time to speak. It is over. The officer is speaking. The officer... You're speaking now. That is not allowed. You have had your 3 minutes. Thank you very much. The officer is speaking. Thank you.
Sorry, so yeah, talking about density, the density comes out at 26 dwellings per hectare, which is certainly low density, and it's considered to be an appropriate density for this rural edge of settlement site. I think if I've missed anything, just let me know and I'll come back to the question.
That was most helpful, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Milnes?
Yes, thank you. I'm with Councillor Reed here. It does worry me, this application. I think it is a small village in the local plan. I think SP4 is quite clear, as even for a rural exception site, that certain criteria need to be met. And I would say that we've got to look at 3 things. There's the site specifics, which apply in SP4. There's the small village, there's the local need. Now, we can argue about all three of those, can't we? But if we look at the local plan, there is a need to comply with SP4, and this local need is quite an issue, I think, in a small village. This isn't Grantham or one of the bigger villages where they can take need from elsewhere in the district. And in the report, paragraphs 513 and 514, the affordable housing officer actually makes the point that this is a need from South Kesteven area. And in 5.1.4, I quote it, approval of this scheme will bring forward a housing development which will not only benefit local applicants for affordable housing and support the local economy, it will also benefit the area as a whole and boost the housing completions for the district. And as she explained to us recently, there is a cascading system for this. So it's not absolutely clear whether this is truly local need in a small village. And I think that's quite critical, this scale of what we've got. It is a major development of 16 houses. So, and you know, there are quite a lot of things about the site specifics that are quite strange as well. And I understand what policy said in their response, which is on the website. And paragraph 213 of the local plan should be substantially enclosed, and the edge should be defined by a physical feature that acts as a barrier to further growth. That doesn't apply in this case. There is a hedge. The hedge can disappear. And also that it shouldn't extend significantly into the open countryside, and this site does. It's round the bend, isn't it, from Claypole? There is no connectivity to the rest of the village except going round a new footpath and round the bend. So I class that as extending into the open country. There is a gap to the north, there'll be gaps to the east, and I understand all the pressures, but Claypole is still a small village. So I have here, I've just gone through policy SP4 as a rural exception, and I accept A is not relevant, but does that mean we're trumped? This is a word I think Councillor Reed will remember that we've spoken about before. Well, I don't think so. Let's look carefully. So B, does it fit well with the character and setting of the area, or is it a pimple on the edge of this village? C, does it fit the pattern of development? Well, I would say that as there is no connectivity and it's round the corner, that is not fitting with the pattern of development. The site does not extend into open countryside, and I think the policy reply was that it probably did, and it doesn't have this stop. E, how local is proven local need, and I've just quoted some sections from the affordable officer on that that's cast doubt on how local it is. G, again, how local. H, again, how local. And then we get to J, and there are claims that alternative sites will be better locationally in the village. Now, that's quite important as well. A better site, we might be able to overcome some of these problems, but that needs investigating. So I think these are overriding. I don't think it's NIMBYism. And I believe unless we look at these schemes very, very carefully, there is a threat to these smaller villages in the local plan. They're smaller villages for a reason. And I mean, I'm quite prepared to propose a refusal on this policy grounds and the site-specific grounds. I think it's a common sense approach to take. It's not statistical and it's not a contrived requirement. I think SP4, SP2, paragraph 213, SD1, EM1, we can go on and on, but that to me is the crux of it, isn't it? It's scale and the small village issues and this local need. So that's my take on it for what it's worth. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Milnes. Thank you. We're going to legal advice, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Obviously just had to listen to members' comments so far. Appreciate not everyone has spoken yet. And obviously you've heard from your planning officer. Few things, if I may. This site the proposal has been put forward as a rural exception site. If I could draw members' attention to the definition of a rural exception site in the NPPF. Small sites used for affordable housing in perpetuity where sites would not normally be used for housing. That's the government's definition. That obviously then feeds into the use of the phrase rural exception site in your local policy. So whilst you do have obviously criteria in SP4 that have to be addressed, obviously your local development plan is your local plan in line with the NPPF. You've got a new NPPF that came out very recently, so this definition is bang up to date. The government are obviously clearly pushing affordable housing. As we know, there is a need nationally, not just districtly. So obviously that is on the government's agenda to push sites, hence why they have this rural exception site policy. Obviously paragraph, forgive me, I think it's 78, all the numbers have changed. Yes, 78 has a specific paragraph relating to rural exception sites from the government, saying how in making planning decisions, we need to be aware of these types of development proposals. And I've forgotten my very last point. I do apologise. I've had a complete blank. I'll have to come back to you, Madam Chairman. I'm so sorry. But I mean, everything that I've said so far is pertinent. You have got, yes, the local plan, but you have got to take into account this very recently introduced NPPF in making your decision and weighing everything up together. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Councillor Harish-Vassana Singh, and then we'll go to Councillor Penny-Milnes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martha. Quick question to, does, you just quoted the exception site. Does the exception site doesn't need to establish needs or local needs?
Oh, if I may, Madam Chairman, that brings me exactly to the point that I couldn't remember. Thank you, Councillor. When we're talking about local need, obviously, there's sort of two things for me to sort of perhaps assist with. One, obviously the comments from your affordable housing officer, whilst she has got and will have made reference to local need, of course, as we've discussed previously, your local plan is district. And when sitting on the planning committee, you're not necessarily just representing or looking at small areas per se, but also your district need generally. And SKDC does have a requirement and has calculated on statistics and facts and figures for the number of affordable houses needed across the district on the plan period. That being the case, there are obviously some statistics relating to Claypole and surrounding areas, and that will have informed your affordable housing officer as well. In terms of if this site were to go ahead, and obviously the affordable housing would then be secured in a Section 106 agreement in perpetuity, that Section 106 agreement will have a cascade in it. And the very first criteria will be people having very close connections or already living and requiring some other form of housing to Claypole. That will be the very first criteria that people are, and that will be the highest rung top people considered. It will then slowly cascade outwards to nearby villages and other settlements, people that perhaps live very nearby and have family connections nearby and would like to move locally, but can't find any housing that they can afford. So Claypole might then be considered as suitable for them to be near their family. So it'd be, and then it effectively cascades out until, yes, the very last rung of that cascade is South Kesteven generally, because obviously we wouldn't want these houses stood empty when we do know there is a need district-wide for affordable housing. But yes, when we're talking, will these be for local people? Yes, at the very beginning, at the very first consideration, it will be who needs a house locally, and it will then step out gradually in rings. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. That was very thought-provoking. Councillor Penny-Milnes.
Yes, thank you. And just going back to the NPPF paragraph 77, and it is this confusion, isn't it, about local need. identified local needs. Now, I know we talk about the district and we're talking about a village, but section H of SP4 is almost quite specific, isn't it? It says meets the affordable housing needs of households who are currently resident or have a local connection to the parish. Well, we're a bit sort of confused about that because I don't think that's entirely correct from what we've been told. There could be an element of that, but not necessarily the whole of it. And also, I keep going back to, we should be complying also with the other criteria in SP4. What's the point of our local plan, talking about small villages, talking about local need, when we can just sort of drive in a coach and horses through it and say, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because we have a lot of small villages, there's a lot of issues going on here. This just highlights some of them. So, the MPPF isn't even clear, is it? So I think, we need to look at what is a local need. Local is local.
Well, yes, it is. The local plan does cover the district. Thank you. And Martha will advise. Thank you.
Yeah, I think actually a lot of what you just said there, Councillor Milnes, I don't necessarily disagree with, but I think I do disagree in that obviously we're in SP4 8, where it says meets the affordable housing needs who are currently resident of local. As I've explained, the Section 106 agreement in the very first instance, and when I say in the very first instance, this is every time the properties become vacant in perpetuity, we start at the top of that cascade. Is there anyone local on the housing register that is suitable for this property? And so it's not just, the very first time they come on the market, it's every time that cascade is then followed. And yes, it might be someone further afield is put into the property, but that's only because the other rings will have been exhausted. So obviously your officers consider, and I have to agree with them, that SP4H is met because of that legal agreement. And then that then addresses that local need. But as I say, the reason the cascade does step out wider and wider and wider is because obviously we don't want them stood empty just because at a particular moment in time, there isn't anyone local suitable to live in the property. Obviously that would be a nonsense, wouldn't it? But yes, and then in terms of then the other criteria of SP4, I completely agree with you. We're not to ignore that. Obviously the MPPF and your local plan do get together, make up the development plan. So I'm certainly not saying we just have to ignore it. But in terms of, I'm pointing out to you that the MPPF has to help shape your interpretation of your local plan. And the definition of rural exception site in the MPPF is that these types of proposals are perhaps considered in locations where you wouldn't ordinarily consider housing, because the government wants to encourage these types of fully affordable developments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Milnes?
I still have an argument with this.
No, sorry, you've got the wrong mic.
Oh, I still have an argument with this on this local need. It's quite clear in the MPPF as well about local needs. And also, there is also an issue of rural isolation, isn't there? Actually, to put somebody from Grantham, Stamford or the Deepings in one of our smaller villages might just not be the right place at all. And I've had evidence of that where people feel like a fish out of water, So it's not appropriate for anybody who's on the housing list at all. And only this morning they're going on about teenagers in villages, and we know about elderly in rural isolation. So there's quite a lot of factors come into this. And unless it is actually local need, and I'm, defining that quite tightly, there's quite a lot of issues crop up, and the impacts on villages, and not just that, but the impacts on the occupants themselves if they're in the wrong place.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, obviously, Lincolnshire is very rural. There are a lot of small settlements, and obviously you still have a housing, you still have to comply with the government's requirements on housing delivery, and an element of that is affordable housing. So you can't, whilst you do focus a lot of your housing growth in the larger settlements, and that is obviously your local plan is very recent, it's been assessed, it's all up to date, great, but there are still a number of allocations in the smaller sites, to my knowledge. And then we do have windfall sites, which are then assessed against your local plan and the MPPF and can determine whether they're suitable or not. And then in additional, I bring you back to paragraph 78 and the definition of rural exception sites. The government then throws in and, hey, if there's an affordable housing, fully affordable housing scheme, have a look at whether actually you can make it work even in a site that you wouldn't ordinarily consider acceptable. That's how keen they are on affordable housing schemes. And yeah, and then finally, people aren't forced into affordable housing, they're offered them. They don't, it's not, this is it or you're homeless. So in terms of talking about people being fish out of water, obviously, if they don't like Claypole or they considered it were too far away from where they wanted to live or where they work or where their friends and family are, they can refuse it. It isn't that this is it and you've got no other else. You would, they would wait till a more appropriate property went for them. So yes. And then on top of that, your officers, your affordable housing officer, though I do appreciate she has an official different title, escapes me right now, say that the applicant has demonstrated that local need. I am sort of not necessarily hearing from members their evidence to the contrary at present. Yes, there's reports. Yes, there's been reports.
Excuse me, can you be quiet in the back? You've had your chance. The officer is speaking. Please be quiet. Thank you.
The parish council has put forward their opinion on the matter, and your officers and your affordable housing officer have put forward their opinion on what the applicant has submitted and also considered what the parish council submitted to them. We've had the discussion about the local plan being district wide, but also being obviously then influenced locally when looking at the individual sites. We've had the discussion about rural exception sites, Lincolnshire in general being rural, the 106 cascade securing that they would go to local people in the very first instance and cascade out on every time a house came up for occupation, not just the very first occupation. And I think I'm out, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha. Councillor Selby, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. First of all, thank you, Martha, for the explanation of the cascade policy that we've used. But there is obviously a question as why it appears that this cascade system has not been used in the past. However, I still remain open-minded about this application, Madam Chairman, at this moment in time. And bearing that in mind, I have a question for the planning officer. Sorry, Phil, going back to a point that I made earlier. Now, I use Google Maps quite often, Madam Chairman. I find it extremely helpful for planning applications to look at the wider picture and everything. I made the point or raised the perception that with the shape of the village, and I've suggested that possibly this application is not outside the periphery of the village when you look at the shape of the village. I appreciate your comment on that, please, Phil. And also, looking at this, can you just somebody tell me where there is a better site, a better application place in Claypole that this sort of, because I can't see one. So, if somebody could just answer those questions for me, please, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Phil.
Yes, I think the point about, is it within the village or edge of the village? If we were going to consider it within the village, we'd be looking at policy SP3, which is the infill policy. And again, I think in my mind, whilst you can argue that the built form sort of extends further to the east, to the north of the site. I don't think this is an infill site, and I don't think this is within the village itself. That policy explicitly requires it to be either a brownfield site or a redevelopment opportunity, or a gap in an existing frontage. And I don't think it's either of those. So I think I'm comfortable that the correct policy is SP4 that we need to consider it under. Just to sort of give a wider response to the question about the relevant criteria around the alternative sites, going back to something Councillor Milne said, it's absolutely correct what you've said. The first point is around need, or there's a series of points around need, and that's quite evidence based. Members need to consider that in coming to that sort of judgment on that point. Just to sort of read some sort of facts, really, the housing, or the extract from the housing register, shows 13 households that identified a need for affordable housing that are either in Claypole or have a direct connection to Claypole. 3 of those are families or individuals over 60. The 2019 Housing Needs Survey shows or concludes that there were 10 respondents or 10 families or individuals that had a need for affordable housing, except that did cover that wider area of Stubden, Dry Doddington and so on. But what we need to do is look at that sort of evidence that's been put forward collectively, and if you take a sort of a very fixed view on it, you would say that the survey says 8 properties of this type and design, and then the proposal that comes forward exactly meets that. I think that's quite a sort of a strong view to take, because that sort of survey or that evidence that comes forward is only ever a snapshot in time. And as has already been discussed, there are other development proposals in the area, Fernwood, the affordable site at Long Bennington. So at some point in time, those households that may have had a need may have moved on, and that they may have been housed elsewhere. So we need to take a sort of a bit of a balanced view on the evidence that's before us in terms of making that judgment on need. But again, my advice, as I've said several times now, is that I think sufficient evidence has come forward to support that need. And I think if members are going to come to a contrary view on that, we'd have to be mindful that will be the point we would be arguing or be prepared to argue through an appeal. As Councillor Milne said, that doesn't necessarily then trump all the other criteria of SP4, and you put forward some suggestions why you don't think those various criteria have been met. They are individually planning judgments that, again, members need to consider, and the report sets out why I consider those various criteria have been met, but a lot of them are judgments, and it's for members to reach a conclusion on those points. Again, coming back to your specific point, Councillor Selby, around alternative sites, some sort of, if you look at the aerial view of Claypole, some alternative sites were discussed or mentioned through the parish council objection. Consideration of that particular point is covered in the main report at paragraph 7.3.12. And again, my sort of conclusion on that point is that there isn't strong enough evidence to suggest that a suitable, better alternative site is either available or is there within the village. Those alternative sites are equally edge of settlement sites, and would be, they would fall under that same sort of policy consideration that we're discussing now. So they would need to go through the same sort of principles that we're addressing now. None of those sites that have been discussed or mentioned have been subject to planning applications, and none of them are within the settlement itself. They were all sort of effectively, greenfield edge of settlement sites. So again, my advice and consideration on that point is that we don't have suitable evidence to suggest that there are better suitable alternative sites.
Thank you. Councillor Harris-Bisnassi, then Councillor Nick Robbins, and then Councillor Robert Reed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Phil. I'm still a bit concerned with regard to SP4 paragraph A, where it says, to establish its needs. We showed support from the parish council here, and the Parish Council did present quite its thought that they have not got no needs, they can't establish any needs for it, and the need seems to be more like on page 50, paragraph 5.31, where it says strategic housing market assessment identifies a need for the 244 additional affordable homes, which I believe this 16 is going to feed into that assessment. But there's an identified need for affordable housing within the districts, but not in Claypole. So we haven't got this need established that we need it there. In that, and also I feel this is more bordering. It's on it's the open countryside, sort of SP5. Can you touch on it earlier on? Because it seems to be outside the village. I mean, you have got the 30 miles per hour limits that normally marks the entry of the village boundary. You know, how far we can take that as such, unless that is moved further up to the new boundary. If this development is going on, then it's within the curtilage of the village. So I still feel I'm got difficulty in supporting the needs to a small community, because Claypole is a small village, and I think we should treat that as identified here under SP2.
Thank you. I believe Phil did demonstrate, and he said that there was 13 properties required. Is that correct?
Yeah, so do you want me to just respond to a couple of those points again? So I think the first point, again, the point's been raised again about substantial support from the local community and specifically the parish council. So I'll just read directly from that particular policy. Halfway down underneath criterion F, it says, as an exception to criterion A being the part of the policy that talks about substantial community support. It says, as an exception to criterion A above, a housing scheme which meets a demonstrable local need for affordable housing will be considered acceptable as a rural exception scheme, regardless of whether criterion A has been satisfied, provided that it is supported by clear, up-to-date evidence that the proposal, and then it goes on to talk about those methods in which the applicant needs to demonstrate local affordable need. So the first point to be clear on is that there isn't a requirement to demonstrate substantial community support. It is all about that justification of need. As I've been through the point about need a couple of times now, that in itself is, as I've said, it's a judgment call based on the criterion in the policy, but it's quite evidence-based. And to be able to argue that point through an appeal, we would need to have some strong evidence to argue to the contrary, that there isn't the need justified for this number and type of affordable homes. I think the final point, again, that you sort of mentioned there about SP5 and SP4, again I've covered that, and I would strongly suggest that SP4 is the correct policy. A significant part of the western edge of the policy abuts up to those existing properties on their they're already to the north of Doddington Lane. So I think to sort of argue that it's separate from the village itself and relevant to be considered under the open countryside policy is a very difficult position to adopt. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much again, Phil. Councillor Nick Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Phil, for that as ever, the comprehensive report. The here and now, I think, is really difficult. We're in a position that hearts and heads, that the heart says, I think all of us would say, you know, we don't want it in Claypole, it's a small village. The heads say that it's a rural exception site, and according to MPPF, then it fits where it is and it ticks all the boxes. I don't want to dwell on this now. I want to look at going forward. The first time I served on the planning committee was 2011. And I've seen an awful lot of applications like the one I'm going to speak about. Can I just very quickly ask you, Phil, what is the how many hectares is this site?
believe, let me just, I want to tell you something that's wrong. If I just quickly check the report, I think it's 0.6, but I'm just going to set in, yeah, 0.6 hectares.
So just over half a hectare, rough average is about, it's about right for density, sort of 30 per hectare is about right then for density. What I'm concerned about is the strange layout of the road. That just stops, and that lends itself to me to be another development further on, which is more than half a hectare. I know this is not material now because we are seeing what was presented before us today, but there've been, in my 10, 11 years involved in the planning process, I've seen some very clever developers skirt around 106 contributions by doing small piecemeal developments, but actually, so there'll be 30 or 40 houses, but actually there'll be 5 applications of 8 each, which then go under the 10 plus trigger point for 106 contributions. So this smacks of that. And although we can't determine it today, I would like something put in, which we have done in the past, to say a condition or something to say that if there isn't to be any development offered in the future, there is a lot less trigger point going forward than there would be if they were doing it as a whole development.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just quickly respond on that point. That normally tactic, I suppose, if you want to use that word of site splitting, is to avoid affordable housing provision. In this case, clearly it's put forward already as a affordable only scheme. So it's already, you know, if this was a market-led scheme, the requirement would be 30% affordable housing, but it's already sort of in itself, it's 100% affordable housing. Any future development to the north, should this be approved, would require a separate planning application, and any infrastructure contributions for that particular development, should it come forward, would need to be assessed at that time and be relevant and proportionate to the size of that development. So, you know, as things currently stand, it would be very difficult for, you know, a market-led scheme. If a market-led scheme came forward on that site to the north, it would have to demonstrate that substantial community support. And sort of as things are with, you know, this site is put forward to meet all the current local affordable housing need, it would be sort of difficult to come forward with further affordable housing as a rural exception site on that site as things stand. But I would just sort of draw back on that point, and you know, I accept that is a reality and something that might be considered another day, and certainly what is a reality is there's a larger application adjacent to the site that we've already got an application for that will have to be considered. But as we have to just look at this individual development and focus on the merits of the scheme itself.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Robert Reed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, my view was to listen to others. Thank you very much, Councillor Mill, for using the word trumped. It took that word to say, when were we trumped? We were trumped by an exception site at Moreton that had SP4 implications to it. It had been 3 times before to committee, before on the 4th time, with the criteria that we were trumped. And I have listened to what has been said. I have listened to the concerns of the member and portfolio holder where we have another site next to it, which I did mention in my address, but it is a separate application, so it can't take consideration on this one, albeit I wholeheartedly agree with his sentiments. I therefore, Chairman, for my part, admit to being trumped. So I therefore make the proposal that we accept the officer's recommendations on the understanding and premise that I've listened to the legal advice. Now, should I make a decision otherwise, then we are open to challenge, which I don't mind being open to challenge, but I honestly feel we wouldn't win the challenge. And I refer back to the word trumped. So I am therefore, I think the density is fine. I think the design, there are merits. I've said what they are, but I still remain with my concerns about the interpretation of SP4 and always, and probably will do on other occasions, but I've said enough. I've made the proposal and I've made the proposal with my reasons why, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mills?
Yes, we were trumped on paragraph 71 of the NPPF, which was an entry-level exception site. I'm told there are various types of exception sites, so we need to be careful which ones we're looking at. I am going to go back to what policy said, and quoting paragraph 2.13 of the local plan, that these edge of settlement developments should be substantially enclosed and the edge should be defined by a physical feature that also acts as a barrier to further growth, such as a road. So taking up Councillor Robbins' point, there is no such thing here. You know, it really is going out into these open fields, and we know there is pressure for development on those fields. There's one that was withdrawn recently because it was going to be refused for 78 houses. There's currently one in for 74 houses on that same site, next to this one. So we know that there is huge pressure to develop all that area there. This is a small village. None of this land was allocated. And, you know, if we keep making these little inroads with no definite stops, it is still a bit of an issue, I would have thought. I don't know. I mean, Nick used the word smacks of future development. I think it's more than smacks of. I mean, it's sort of staring us in the face, isn't it? And okay, it might be a new application, but it is totally not connected to the village, this pieces of land. There's a very suspicious footpath as it goes into the village, which I'm told is not particularly good at all. And anyway, this particular site doesn't connect to that footpath. So the only way is to go down Doddington Lane and round that tricky corner. And, you know, I think there's just loads of still question marks over it and concerns. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Yeah. Do I have a seconder for this proposal? Well, I will second. Go on then, Councillor Robbins. Will you second it? Yeah. So I have a seconder, Councillor Nick Robbins. Otherwise, I would have done it. So therefore, I think we need to go to the vote because we're just going around and round in circles. All those in favour? No, it wasn't. It wasn't. She said she would be happy, but didn't actually say I'm making the proposal. So I haven't taken that proposal. Thank you. So I've had a definite proposal from Councillor Robert Reed, a seconder from Councillor Nick Robbins. So all those in favour, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 in favour. Those against? 2. That's carried then. Thank you. And I propose that we have a 10-minute break. So, Councillor Robbins.
Can I excuse myself from this last item? I've got an executive brief at 3:30 in the Newton room. Thank you.
Right, lovely. Could everybody please take the seat so that meeting can reconvene? Thank you very much.
Paul. Pardon?
You're waving goodbye to me.
I thought a better.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, can we please take our seats? Thank you. Are we nearly ready with your presentation? Thank you. Right, we will restart the meeting and it will be item 6. And we have item 6 and it'll be Ellie Seiler will be presenting. Thank you. When IT are ready.
There we go. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon, councillors. This next proposal is reference S210899. The application is for the change of use of agricultural land to a proposed dog exercise and training facility to the north of Barkston. The key issues are the principle of development, visual impact and the character of the area, impact on residential amenity, highway safety and parking. Just an aerial view of the site, just to give a bit of context. To the west, you've got Hough Road, which is where the access is gained from. And then to the east, you've got the A607. And to the south, you can see the village of Barkston. And those houses just at the top to the north are the Lees. So again, the site location plan just closer up. This is a view of the site from the north side, looking southwards towards the Lees and towards Barkston. This is looking towards the A607, and that hedgerow that you can see in the picture roughly marks the north boundary of the site. And this shows the access off Hough Road, again looking southwards towards Barkston. So this is the proposed site plan. The dashed line that you can see around here indicates a 1.8 high metre fence. Now, one of the main concerns raised was visual impact of the fence. So this plan has been revised to include mixed hedgerow along the south boundary, as well as trees interspersed, as well as along the east boundary. Then you've got hedgerow to the north anyway and hedgerow along Hough Road. So that would mitigate any visual impact. So the top left-hand corner, you can see the parking area. This is an informal parking area for approximately 6 cars. Again, concerns have been raised about parking, mainly concern that people would park on Hough Road, but the conditions that have been added within the report should ensure that there wouldn't be a need at any time for more than 6 cars to be parked there. it was raised at the site visit, a concern about when training sessions are on for dog training, that there may be clashes with people arriving and leaving at the same time, which could cause a bit of chaos on the lane. So there's another proposed condition that was in the additional items to ensure there's a 30-minute gap between training sessions to ensure that doesn't happen. And then the other concern raised was for noise from barking dogs, and that was for the people that live on the leas. So again, there's conditions to ensure that it's minimised as much as possible. These are all included within the report, as well as the additional items, but we have got a couple of extra ones that have been added since then. So we've said that no amplifying equipment should be used on the site at any time, and the applicant has also agreed to slightly reduced hours of use as well, as you can see there on the screen. And then just further to that, just a couple of informatives for clarity, really, just to ensure that no lighting is put on the site, as that's not been approved, and no storage facilities either. And both of those things would require another planning application should they ever be required. So just to summarise then, the principle is in accordance with SP5 and E7 as stated within the report. Visual impact has been mitigated through the hedgerow as well as the trees. Residential amenity impact is considered acceptable, and parking, as we've just discussed, is also acceptable, and LCC highways haven't objected. And then there are some access improvements that are required that have been secured by condition. So the recommendation is to approve subject to the conditions that are within the report and the additional items and the ones that have been discussed in this presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ellie, for a good presentation. And can I call upon Mike Sibthorpe, the applicant agent, please?
Chairman, good afternoon. My name's Mike Sibthorpe and I represent the applicant in this case. Planning officer has fully outlined the nature of the proposals to you, and obviously we're very supportive of her recommendation. A number of representations have been made, and during the life of the application, several requests for amendments have been made to address some of the issues that have been raised. The applicant has agreed to a scheme of tree and hedge planting around the perimeter of the site, and the applicant is more than willing to comply with the operating times that have been suggested and which are now part of the amended condition that Ellie's just mentioned. The applicant operates a dog walking and animal sitting business in Barkston, and the primary purpose of this proposal is to enable her to exercise dogs safely and securely. When not required by herself, the field will be rented out on an hourly basis for dog owners to have exclusive use to exercise their dogs safely. There is a significant demand for this type of facility as the opportunities where dogs can be exercised freely off a lead become more limited. The site may also be used for small dog training classes, although this is not the primary purpose of the use. As dogs will be with their owners or people known to them and not mixing with other dogs outside established groups, there's not likely to be any unacceptable noise or barking arising from the exercising use. The site is located some distance from the nearest residential properties, and the applicant is proposing the planting and the application is proposing the planting of a hedge along the site boundaries that will provide some further noise mitigation. The use will operate during daylight hours and no lighting is proposed at the site. When not in use, the gates of the facility will be locked to prevent unauthorised usage. Traffic movements to and from the site will be very low and generally confined to 1 or 2 users per hour. There is adequate provision for off-road parking adjacent the exercise area, and there will be no need for users to have to park on off-road. A dog waste disposal point is to be provided at the site, and this will be subject to a servicing contract with a waste contractor. The proposals are considered to represent an appropriate countryside activity
30 seconds.
And one that is supported by relevant national and local planning policies. There'll be no unacceptable impacts on the character and appearance of the area, and the extensive conditions proposed, which the applicant supports, will ensure that the use will not give rise to any harm to residential amenity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions for the agent, please? Councillor Paul Woods.
Yeah, I always think it's good to ask Mike Sibthorpe a question, actually, Madam Chairman. I'm not against the application. It seems quite a good idea, to be quite honest. I just wondered, Mike, if you could tell me, it is just for dog exercising and training. I know it says that in the report. It's not for any breeding or anything like that, is it? And roughly how far is it? It seems quite a distance from the nearest property. Roughly how far is it from the nearest property?
Thank you, Chairman. It's precisely what we're proposing to do. It's just a safe area to exercise dogs where you can let them off the lead and let them run freely. There will be some small classes, but I think the conditions restrict the size of those. So that will just be a trainer coming in to train people and their dogs in animal behaviour and such like. And that's all it's about. There's no buildings proposed, no lighting proposed, no commercial use, no breeding or anything like that. The site will be vacant, overnight. There's not going to be anything staying on the site. And I think it's just under 100 metres to the boundary with the properties on the lees.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions from anybody? Thank you very much then. And thank you for bearing with us. And do I have any questions for the officer? No? It's questions and debate with the officers, isn't it? Councillor Milnes.
Well, I'd just like to thank the officer very much for the extra conditions. I think that makes this very acceptable use now at the site. It is 96 metres from the back of the Lees properties, which are mainly elderly occupants down there, retired people. It is an open field and sound in the countryside does travel, but I'm very pleased with the conditions. I'm very pleased with the mixed hedge and trees, and I think it all makes it very, very acceptable indeed as a countryside use. So I think it's conditioned no other uses, no buildings, there's no lighting, no amplified sound. So thank you very much. And I think I'll propose we approve this.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Bisnassing. Councillor Robbins, did you want to? Right, okay. Councillor Selby then.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. It's quite a responsibility looking after a dog. This past weekend, Madam Chairman, I was actually dog sitting for some friends that were attending a wedding. The little dog I was looking after, Madam Chairman, quite some character, I'll tell you, it's actually a Staffordshire Bull Terrier. And Staffordshire Bull Terriers, they've got a reputation, haven't they, Madam Chairman? Well, they can have. And this little character, well, he loved people, he loved kiddies, but I was warned that he didn't like other dogs and didn't like cats. And I live in a housing area, and I took him up Green Lane in, which anybody knows the Harrowby area, there's a little lane. And I took him up there. And on one occasion, I must have come across half a dozen other dogs. And if I picked him up, he was fine. I turned his head away, he was absolutely fine. But he was going to eat him alive, he would have done. But so with that in mind, Madam Chairman, I would suggest that a facility like this that's being proposed would have been absolutely ideal to have taken him and given him a run around in that sort of place. And I'm sure there's quite a few other dog owners that have got dogs that don't like other dogs because, it's how they are, isn't it? They can be territorial, can't they? So, I think this application, but personally, I like it very much. So I shall be supporting it. I say I wish the applicant all the very best with it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have one of those dogs that would like to eat other dogs as well, and cats and pigeons and squirrels.
Especially as it's in Barkston, Madam Chair.
Do I have any other speakers? We've had a proposer, we've had a seconder. Right. can I put it to the vote then, please? All those in favour, can you raise your hands? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And I close the meeting at 3:54. Well done. Thank you all very much for coming and attending and staying. And thank you, officers and Martha.